Learners countrywide head home for the August break as the term 2 school calendar comes to an end today.
President William Ruto leads bilateral talks with his Mozambique counterpart Philip Nyusi during state visit in Maputo.
And across the borders, West African countries to deploy ECOWAS standby force to restore constitutional order in the Republic of Niger.
Good morning. Time for your morning coffee. My name is Fred Indimule. This is the Morning Cafe. And yes, you do need that coffee. It is very chilly here in Nairobi, lows of 14 degrees Celsius. How hot is a coffee where you are?
And good morning. And as we prepare for the Youth Day, today starts as usual now with an African proverb. And today, the youth can walk faster, but the elder knows the road. That is African proverb for you this particular morning. I'm yours truly, Stanley Nyeringita. I hope we'll have a fantastic Friday.
Well, a very good morning to you and welcome to Morning Cafe. This 11th day of August 2023. It's a pleasure to have you right here. And of course, today you can keep it Morning Cafe for some entertainment towards the end of the show. Good morning. I'm Flora Limuke.
All right, let's get the top story. Nominated Senator Gloria Orwoba is now staring at a 6-month suspension from the Senate after she defied summons from the House Powers and Privileges Committee to face charges brought against her. Orwoba is accused of making unsubstantiated allegations concerning sexual harassment and reports of corruption on social media and press conferences without substantiating them. The nominated senator was summoned before the disciplinary committee chaired by Speaker Amason Kingi, but ignored it, prompting the team to institute the disciplinary proceedings. The Senate committee has now recommended the controversial senator be denied hefty perks and allowances during her 6-month suspension and also be barred from accessing the precincts of Parliament. Meanwhile, in the National Assembly, Embakasi East MP Babu Owino was ejected from the House after shouting at Deputy Speaker Gladys Sholay. He now stands suspended for 4 days. And this leads us to our question this morning. Should age be a factor in selecting our leaders? You can send your comments on TV47 News on X and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya, and we'll be sampling your views as we proceed and continue with this broadcast. Should age be a factor in selecting our leaders? Let's now get the day's diary.
Well, a quick look at our diary this morning, and PS Interior Raymond Omolo is expected in Kisumu today. The Principal Secretary for Internal Security and National Administration, Omolo, will open the Private Security Regulation Authority Regional Office in Kisumu County today. And away from that, President William Ruto embarks on his 2-day state visit to Mozambique. As it enters day 2, is expected to hold discussions with his host President Philip Nyusi aimed at strengthening and expanding bilateral ties between Kenya and Mozambique. Elsewhere, CS for ICT and Digital Economy, Eliud Owalo, is expected in Kuria West and Kuria East in Migori County today to launch the public Wi-Fi hotspot and digital hubs in those areas, and later on in other different counties tomorrow. Also, look at today in history. This 11th day of August in 2007 is when the announcement of former President Uhuru Kenyatta's victory at the polls, as opposition supporters in Nairobi Coast and western counties of Kisumu, Siaya, Migori and Homa Bay protested with chants of Uhuru must go. It is then that we saw police also involved with in protest with the Kenyans, and that led to the bizarre experience of the 2008 post-election violence. That is what we have. Away from that, the controversial pastor Paul Mackenzie is to remain in custody for the next 47 days. We keep on updating you on our diary as we move on.
All right, thank you for the diary. Let's now take a look at what's headlining on the dailies, and we start off with the Daily Nation. Today, the Daily Nation goes with education. Education for the rich, that's the main headline of the Daily Nation. Some public universities charging more than private. The chairperson of Public Universities Vice Chancellor's body, Professor Daniel Mugendi, says alarm over high fees is misguided, adding some students do not understand the admission letters. But the shock figures have parents and students on edge, uncertain about access to state scholarship and the new system. And it gives some figures there: 30 billion shillings allocation in shillings to the Higher Education Loans Board for student loans based on an index. 16 billion is the amount in shillings set aside for scholarships disbursed through the university's fund. And 4,000 is the number of students who had applied for assistance by Wednesday out of 140,107. So the general confusion over the new funding model for universities headlining on the front page of the Daily Nation today. Other stories making it to the front page of the Daily Nation. Azimio ignites a fresh row with claims of bias in a fertilizer supply. National Assembly Minority Leader Opiyo Wandayi alleges a state-sanctioned scheme to deny farmers in Nyanza access to the low-cost fertilizer ahead of the short rain season. The government has further reduced the price of a 50-kilogram bag to 2,500 shillings from 3,500 to boost food production. The story is on page 10. Another story there, final note: a veteran Congolese singer dies. Kalenga Nzazi, aka Vivi, the composer of Le Mangelepa's hit song Embakasi, died on Wednesday here in Nairobi. Another story, our top story, also features on the front page of the Daily Nation today. Senator stars row with top house official. Nominated Senator Gloria Orwoba faces lengthy suspension from the Senate following serious allegations against a parliamentary official that were, however, dismissed. The story is on page 4. And property owners in 6 counties face higher land rates. Treasury approves a plan by the Lands Ministry to increase land rates in Nairobi, Mombasa, Nakuru, Kisumu, Eldoret and Kiambu in a bid to raise 8 billion shillings. An interesting read on the front page that's highlighted on the front page of the Daily Nation today on the top strip. 50 years of hip-hop from New York to Nairobi, Kala Mashaka and the rise of Kenya's pop culture. I am certain that apart from myself, no one else on this table understands who Kala Mashaka are.
Continue doubting them.
No. Tell me about Kala Mashaka.
Kala Mashaka Now, let's focus on youth now, and then when we get to entertainment.
Yeah, Limuki.
But I've definitely had
entertainment
Let's not even
segment.
go there.
I've definitely had a song, two of Kilamashaka.
Okay.
I may not really know.
Don't bite your tongue.
Them.
It's okay. Yeah, 50 years of hip hop from New York to Nairobi. Kalamashaka. The story is on page 2. And that is what is headlining on the front page of the Daily Nation this Friday.
Well, quick look at the Standard this morning. The headline on the Standard being the making of a rogue police boss. Japheth Koome, they have pictured in the top page of the Standard. Japheth Koome is accused of insensitivity after claiming the opposition hired corpses to make it appear police had killed protesters. However, the Inspector General is under fire from Azimio, the bereaved civil society and morticians. That story is on page 4 of the Standard this morning. And still on the Standard, the story on the Granny Skin quiz on puzzling death. 8 people, including 3 relatives of the 84-year-old found dead in a compound, were questioned by DCI as probe continues on what police say is possible murder. Of course, it is a story that has been developing since Monday. You can find that a special report on page 6 of the Standard this morning. And court burst a man's hopes in condom case. The man claimed the tools of trade tore well in the act, but judge said since he was cheating on his wife, his account couldn't be believed, thus no compensation. Okay, can have a look at that story on page 3 of the Standard. And on the top strip of the Standard this morning, Western still holding out for jobs promise in government. That story is on page 8 of the Standard this morning. And away from that, some matters business. Cost of living crisis escalates on dollar wars. Remember, as of Tuesday, the dollar exchange shilling to dollar rate Kenya was at 150 shillings. And in some sports, race for EPL crown begins with City in pole position. Okay, that is what we have on the Standard this morning.
Thank heavens it's not Arsenal there. I have the Business Daily and I also have Taifa Leo before Fred takes a look at People Daily. On the Business Daily this morning, it says the front page, banks strike high profile borrowers in default panic. Let me zoom to that one. Hashi Energy latest to feel wrath of lenders over 5 billion Kenyan shillings, and creditors under pressure to cut down bad loans. They have a number of banks there and what various companies / people owe banks in a billion shillings. Away from that, on the left, the right side of the front page of the Business Daily, CBK props up funding for banks hit by liquidity shortfalls. Below there, KRA seeks 1.8 billion shillings from Naivas supermarket stake sale. From matters money, now into Taifa Leo. And one thing you'll always learn about Taifa Leo is you'll always expect a very interesting headline from Taifa Leo. And today they go with Raila atafutiwa mfupa. Kwa nini? Kulingana na Taifa Leo ni kuwa mazungumzo, japo upande wa serikali umesema utayapa umuhimu masuala yasiyohitaji katiba kurekebishwa, baadhi ya mapendekezo yatahitaji kura ya maamuzi. Taarifa hiyo kwa ukamilifu upo katika ukurasa wa 2. Hapo chini, taarifa ya kushangaza ni kwa asili ya paka jini. Katika maeneo mengi ya Afrika Mashariki, mbali na kuwa mnyama wa kufugwa, paka huhusishwa na imani za kutisha. Ni imani zilizokita mizizi hasa katika maeneo ya pwani ya Kenya. Habari kamilifu katika ukurasa wa 5. Something that I'd really want to read there. Vidokezo, koma mama wazee, koti ya shauri kijana asizoe kuchumbia vikongwe. Okay. From that, Ushoga, Uganda yafokea benki ya dunia. We had that yesterday, where the World Bank had halted some loans to Uganda. Hapo juu, chuo kikuu karo mpya yahofisha wazazi wengi washtushwa na ukubwa wa karo ya vyuo na ufadhili. Na kabumbu ya EPL yaanza rasmi leo. Mabingwa Man City wanaalika limbukeni Burnley katika ufunguzi. Na nitarudia hii kwa mara ya pili na ya tatu ili wenzangu katika studio Flora Limuki na Fred Ndimuli waweze kusikia tena. Mabingwa Man City waalika limbukeni Burnley katika ufunguzi. Kwa mara ya pili, wabingwa Man City waalika limbukeni Burnley katika ufunguzi.
I'm still trying to find the latest edition of the People Daily. So for now, let me move on to The Star. And The Star is headlining with how SRC gave MPs a bigger pay than Ruto. Yeah. How SRC hands MPs better pay than the president. An MP to take home about 1.7 million shillings every month. Well, the president's salary is 1.4 million. And of course, this comes from the president's request to the SRC that his and his deputy salaries should not be reviewed at this time. You remember yesterday we were talking about the review of salaries for public and state officers. So now it appears the MPs will be taking home a little more than the president, and that's what's headlining on The Star this morning. Even as we continue looking at the People, looking for the latest edition of the People Daily, let's cross the borders to Uganda. The Daily Monitor: tighten your belts for budget cuts, says the government. A day after the World Bank announced that it was suspending lending to Uganda, technocrats are asking the rich. Okay, I can't really tell exactly what's happening, but they're encouraging the government to cut down on spending. And this is going to hit hard on the Ugandan government. Another story headlining on the front page of the Daily Monitor: Besige's tormentor Arinaitwe remanded. And another one: Museveni reverses ban on media ads. Those are the stories headlining in Uganda this morning. Let's cross over to Tanzania now. In Tanzania we have the Mwananchi: koti ya bariki mkataba koti ya bariki mkataba wa bandari. Mkataba wa yasema mkataba si batili, hoja za wadai hazina mashiko. Another one: Rais Samia ataka namba moja kwa kila Mtanzania. Some of these headlines, unless you read the story, you cannot really tell what's happening. Other stories on the front page of the Mwananchi: vyama azaki vyabaini kitu katika katiba mpya. Katoliki polisi jiji kumalizana eneo la Naura. Mbinu kuepuka uvimbe kwenye kizazi bila athari. And on the top strip, njia sahihi za kupunguza athari za unywaji kahawa. Really? Okay, let me take a sip of mine.
Interesting, by the way.
Njia sahihi za kupunguza athari wa unywaji kahawa.
But then here we'll always advocate that we serve you the different types of coffee that you...
And serve it hot.
Yeah. And strong, or with a little of a sweetener.
Still in Tanzania, The Citizen: Samia's directives on one ID number, digitalization drive. Oh, more, you see now I get the gist of the story on the Mwananchi. The number moja. Oh. So it was more or less like even the push for Huduma number in Kenya. So Samia's directive on one ID number, digitalization drive. President Samia Suluhu Hassan yesterday issued directives meant to expedite implementation of the Universal Identification Number Plan, digitization of government processes, and provision of affordable internet access and free Wi-Fi in public areas. Well, at least Kenyans, we've been through that, so we know exactly what that is.
It's definitely efforts to find the people daily. You have another one?
Just still on the front page of the Citizen in Tanzania, how $24 million project can create horticulture millionaires. And why High Court threw out case on IGA and what verdict, means. 63% satisfied with government performance on economy. That's a survey that features on the front page of the Citizen this morning in Tanzania. Yep.
Right, and the fact that we've taken a little look at Kenya, Uganda, and also Tanzania. Now let's take a look at the East African. The East African still goes with this particular story on SGR. Is really sticking on this for a minute now. Kenya, Uganda seek 6 billion shillings. Remember the last time I was trying to have this, it was quite a mouthful. Today I've hacked it. 6 billion shillings to put SGR on track. The two partners have abandoned, wait, is this today's? Let me just confirm.
Yes, it's a weekly, East Africa is a weekly edition,
true.
So it's the same story.
Oh, the same one. Two partners have abandoned the regional sponsor, China, and they're talking to European and Gulf lenders targeting to take the line all the way to DRC, Rwanda, and Juba. That's why I'm wondering why.
It looks very familiar.
Looks very familiar, yeah.
Yeah.
So so we really have to wait and see what the East African has for next week.
Okay. So probably it's a time for us to take a look at the cartoons today.
Which definitely.
There's an interesting bit here before even we move. A bill that seeks to lock ex-governors out of seats other than the presidency. It is a bill that has been sponsored by nominated Senator Raphael Chimera. That's on the page 5 of the Standard this morning. The bill seeks to amend the constitution to exclude individuals who have served as county governors from eligibility for any elective office except the president's within 5 years of leaving office has been introduced in the Senate. That will be an interesting one because right now I think we have more than three or two governors who are now senators. Yeah, and now if at all this bill passes, they'll wait for 5 more years before seeking for any elective seat. And
curiously, yes, one of them is currently in the eye of the storm. Yes. That's the former governor of Uasin Gishu, on that whole issue of the Finland sponsorship.
Yes.
And he's among those who got elected to the Senate immediately after he left the governorship position.
Yes.
And probably that's where actually this story emanates from. The fact that
you're recycling.
You've just come out of being governor, then you head to the Senate where you're supposed to be oversighting over county performance and defending devolution, and probably questions are raised with regard to your performance. So,
and speaking of questions raised on the page 16 of the Standard this morning, these are questions that were raised yesterday. Was it yesterday or the day before? I think it was yesterday on Taifa Leo. It was a very interesting highlight there. Quote unquote, Chiriku something, and Mabubu Bungeni on this page 16. You can take a look at that with us. Caricature that looks like a leader that you probably may or may not know. It says at public rallies, holding a mic there, and he looks quite vocal. But inside Parliament, blindfolded, with his mouth is shut. He can't hear anything. Okay.
I can't hear nor see.
Can't hear, can't see, can't say anything. That's on page 16 of the Standard. On page, which page is it?
16.
Page 16 still on the Daily Nation now. This really has to do with what is happening in Niger, if I'm not wrong. Let's pursue backing before biting. This is a caricature that looks like a former Nigerian president.
No, actually, the current Nigerian
president.
The
current, yeah.
Tinubu.
Yeah, he represents the West African leader, the current West African leadership. That's at the helm of ECOWAS. And even according to one of our highlights, ECOWAS yesterday rather, decided that they're going to deploy the standby ECOWAS force to restore constitutional order in the Republic of Niger. For them, that would mean restoring the ousted leader who's still under house arrest.
So then this cartoon now depicts an ECOWAS as a toothless dog.
Yes, interesting. Yeah, well, we have to wait and see. They issued a mandate to the military junta in Niger, asking them to return the ousted leader into office, or they send the military. The 7-day ultimatum lapsed. Now they're saying they will send that ECOWAS standby force. Whether or not they will actually do it, we have to wait and see. But I really like the cartoon on the Standard today.
I think
very loud at public rallies.
Yes.
But in the house of which you are elected to actually go and represent people, legislate, oversight, you cannot see anything, you cannot say anything, and you do not hear anything. So you see no evil, hear no evil, and say no evil.
But then now, do no evil? Are they?
It's the Standard carries the day as well.
Yeah. This whole week we'll continue, of course, gauging the performance of members of parliament.
Yes.
It is also interesting that a number of questions are being raised about the conduct of the younger members of parliament. We cannot, from our position, cannot really declare judgment upon anyone. We can only comment on what we see, especially in public spaces. And hence our question today.
And should age be a factor?
Yes, should age be a factor in selecting our leaders? And remember, tomorrow is the International Youth Day. Today being Friday, we're going to have the youth perspective right after the break. Younger leaders, young upcoming leaders, getting their views on quite a number of issues affecting the country today, from education to politics to the economy. It is going to be a very interesting discussion. Do stand by for that. If I can get just go back to my panelists for this morning. Yes, we'll be having Brian Munaita, Chief Operations Officer, SMAX Foundation, Anita Nkirote, Governance Consultant, and Uno Ikenye, President of the Nakuru County Students Caucus. He's a law and governance expert. Do stand by for that. It's going to be very interesting.
Tasnia ya elimu ilipaa, ikavuka milima na mabonde na kutua katika mji juu ya milima. Na wiki hii kutoka kaunti nambari 12, kaunti ya Meru, tunakuletea
Asante Bikinara kwa kunipa fursa hii ili kupinga mjadala usemao Afrika bado inatawaliwa na mkoloni.
Ukiangalia Afrika haiko pale pale wakoloni waliacha. Afrika inazidi kukua na kukua kila kuchao.
Uhuru ambao mlipewa na bado mnasema leo mlipewa ni uhuru wa bendera, bali si uhuru wa kumiliki ambacho ni chenu.
Pia wewe ukienda kununua kitu utapata kuwa wakigeuza uangalie kimeandikwa kimetengenezwa wapi. Ukipata kijaandikwa Uchina au ni imani na hicho chombo.
When someone chokes, advise them to cough. And if this is not effective, bend them forward and give them about 5 back blows to try and clear the blockage. And if they're still choking,
miss out on government funding under the new financing model, as only those with deep pockets will afford it. And this is the main discussion this morning. Allow me to introduce my panelists. I have Brian Munaita, Chief Operations Officer, Marks Foundation. And on my left, Uno Ikenye. He's the president of the Nakuru County Students Caucus. He's also a law and governance expert. Gentlemen, let's start from this position. Looking at this, a lot has been said about the new university model. Issues to do with university funding are deep and at the core of education, basically. You may be able to go through the elementary school, primary school, high school, but then again, if you're not able to pursue tertiary education, it becomes a problem for your career progression. Now, a lot has been said about the reforms that are being rolled out in education. One of them is the funding model for universities. But now the story on the Daily Nation today talks about how universities, public universities, will be charging more than private universities. That's on one hand. On the other hand, Daniel Mugendi, the University of Embu Vice Chancellor, says that probably the fact is that we may have not understood the funding model properly. On page 6 of the Daily Nation today, there's a breakdown of how some courses will be charged in different universities. For example, at the Kenyatta University, Bachelor of Science, Food Nutrition and Dietetics and Environmental Science will require a student to pay 612,000 shillings, while a nursing degree at the Daystar University will charge 128,300. Kenyatta University is a public university, Daystar is private. School of Education, Arts and Social Sciences at the University of Kabianga will require 244,000 shillings, and I think this is per year. And a law degree at Daystar University, 152,000 shillings, 300. Now, this amounts, I was in university quite some years back, and what we were paying back then was way low, way low. And I'm certain even if it went up, it did not even triple. So it was still way below 100,000 shillings for tuition fees to university in a year. Now we're talking about amounts above 500,600,000. Definitely this has a potential to lock out a number of people from university education. Let's start with you, Brian. Are you worried that this could actually lock out a number of your friends, your colleagues, your relatives from university education?
Yes, I am greatly concerned that the proposed funding model will deny the opportunity for tertiary education for a lot of youth who are meaning to go to university and better their lives through education, which in Kenya for some time now has been perceived as the key to success. And I think it's something that is avoidable, but for some reason, there was no foresight or goodwill to prevent it. This all started a while back when the students who go to public universities and pay for their own courses, that model was scrapped. And we found that universities all of a sudden realized that they were unsustainable. They had a lot of expenses that they could not sustainably manage to raise without the subsidies from the government and without the students who are paying for their own education. And all that has compounded now into this proposed funding model, which locks out effectively over 80% of the population. We know that only a measly 5% of Kenyans actually earn 50,000 Kenyan shillings and above. So at what point are we expecting the parents to be able to afford these fees? This is also really discouraging because it's coming on a background of disillusionment. We have a lot of students graduating from university and being unable to find a job. And if that disillusionment is not addressed, we have a situation where this funding model will actually lead to less students getting into universities, which will have the rollover effect of these universities having to close because they have no source of revenue. I think what needs to be done is a discussion needs to be had, and the government needs to be very deliberate about ensuring that the university funding system is sustainable, not only for the universities, but also for students. And I think we'll be able to discuss the particulars of what that education should look like.
Ikenya, your take on this, you're a student leader, so I'm assuming you're still within that sphere. You interact with these university students. And you know, even when university education was relatively affordable, people still struggle. Some of them are forced without any sort of income to try and find ways of funding their own education.
Sure. My take would be this. In Nakuru County, for example, I have been taking part in the fight towards the eradication, or rather, we want the government to abolish the HELB scheme. And early this year, we were fighting so that it could be transited in form of scholarships and grants. But of course, we have made, I think, 10 steps forward. We had made 10 steps forward, by initiating this idea. But again, we have made another 20 steps backward. Likening all this, or rather, bringing up the concept that was elaborated by Nelson Mandela, that education is the only tool that you can use to change the world. And at the same time, it is the only tool that can be used to equalize every man under the sun. The government should at all times endeavor to ensure that education is accessible to all. But as times are moving, you are realizing that whatever has been quoted under the Daily Nation's headline, that education shall forever remain to be for the rich, that is what we should prepare to see in the coming future. And it's not something that we should be proud of.
Yes, you mentioned something interesting, that you've been pushing for the abolishment of the HELB model. Why is that?
For the longest time, you cannot have education being transacted as a form of business or enterprise. We felt like, as time is moving, education should be granted. It should be accessible to all students and not being loaned. Students should not be loaned by the government. There is some time back when I used to hear that our parents used to be given some, grants called boom. Yes. Currently, these are loans. So after a student has been unable to pay these loans, then they are listed into the CRBs. Why should you criminalize someone who has been in pursuit of education? So our view was, let the government abolish these HELB loans and transit them to a scholarship model of funding, where we are going to look at students who are able. They are going to be given a certain percentage of these scholarships. Maybe you'll be given 80%. Those ones who are completely unable, they are given 100% scholarship. And that is how we are going to to narrow down that, I always refer to it as a pyramid of literacy levels in Kenya, where each and every day we are broadening the base of this pyramid. When my brother was talking about, creating a lot of, increasing the rate of unemployment in Kenya, I thought about it from this perspective. Yes, we have increased the fees. For example, in this piece, in today's piece, I'm seeing a parent saying that, taking, for example, a student who has been admitted to Karatina University in Nyeri County for a Bachelor of Education Arts. This education, a person who intends to become a teacher, he or she shall be required to pay 225,420. So what if this person is not able to pay that amount? We'll end up in the village, and that we shall not be solving the issue of unemployment in Kenya. And therefore, this is something that the government should really reconsider and revisit.
And perhaps it has a lot to do with our understanding of this proposed funding model, because up until now, I think, and those of us who went to university a few years back, that probably we enjoyed lower fees because the government subsidy was guaranteed. That it wasn't cheap per se. The government was subsidizing that education. Now you will have to apply for either a scholarship, a loan, or a bursary, meaning that if you apply, you may or may not get it. Perhaps that's the biggest concern, that it's no longer a guarantee. That the same way some people apply even for help loans and end up not getting anything. That even in my application for either a scholarship, a loan, or a bursary, it's still not a guarantee. Do you think that will put off a lot of people?
I think that will put off a lot of people. I'd say for a government, one of the most important things is the trust that your citizenry is able to place in you. Unfortunately, the track record from way back, let's say since independence, it's been that the government is going to be very scanty or very tricky when it comes to fulfilling its promises. And it's also the same issue we see reflected in the lottery system for the proposed housing fund as well. So Kenyans are correct to feel that, okay, I might apply for this and I might miss it. And the issue I think we are not seeing in this funding model is that at the end of the day, university education is also a product or a service or a business. And raising the prices this drastically, even tripling them, is simply going to affect the supply and demand of it. Yes, the demand is high, but the supply is also high. We have universities like Makerere, which feature in ranking alongside Kenyan universities as well. And this is just like a while back when they raised the taxes on Senator Keg and expected to collect more revenue from taxing Senator Keg. What happened? People resorted to the drinks that are 10 bob or 5 bob, and they didn't collect as much revenue as they expected to. So there is that law of unintended consequences that we are not seeing, that is compounded by the fact that Kenyans don't really trust the government at this point. Too many promises have been broken. And that will also lead to a transition to seeking options for university.
So you foresee that many Kenyan learners will be crossing the border into neighboring countries just seeking education?
Exactly, exactly. They'll be going to East African universities. Agencies which support students to go abroad will make a killing. Because if you're going to charge me 612,000 for a Bachelor of Science, which is, let's say, in the relevant landscape, not a skill that I would per se say ranks highly. We're moving into the fourth industrial revolution. You're looking at AI, you're looking at coding, you're looking at robotics. Is this course making me future ready? I would rather invest that money into, let's say, getting my cousin or getting my child, if I have one, into a course that will future-proof them and ensure they get a place in the economy that is coming. That's where everyone is moving. So if they're going to charge these courses, I would rather they say, okay, we are revamping the educational curriculum. We are going to teach everyone coding for the first 4 years.
Which is not the case.
Which is not the case, exactly. We are paying for something outdated. There's no value for money.
Yeah, the government, any progressive government needs to ensure that it has enough workforce, skilled workforce going forward towards, if at all we are looking forward towards industrialization. And at this point, allow me to introduce my other panelist, Anita Nkirote, governance consultant. Good morning, karibu sana. You found us right in the middle of this discussion about what features on the front page of the Daily Nation today, Education for the Rich. It has to do with the university's funding model. On one hand, concerned that public universities could end up charging more for their degree courses than even private universities. On the other hand, University Dawn saying probably you do not understand the funding model. So is it a question of communication as well? Because yes, we're seeing here Kenyatta University for a Bachelor of Science degree, 612,000. But then the Dawn is saying this is because you still have to apply for a scholarship. You still have to apply for either a loan, a scholarship, or a bursary. This government subsidy is no longer guaranteed. What do you feel about that?
I'm deeply concerned about that, because that means you're locking out education, quote unquote, for the rich. And some of these policies, education was known to be an equalizer before. So currently when you lock it out like that, then you're gonna make, I mean, those are the basic tenants. Even if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, the first top 3 speak about food security, education, and you cannot mess with the basics. Once you mess with the basics, then it means there's no equalizer. And as my brother had mentioned, when you look at this is bad for Kenya, but very good for the East African community. I'll begin there. I don't know if you remember around the 1980s and 90s when we had a strong EAC, and we had like Makerere used to do maybe medicine, and then we had, I don't know, Tanzania was very good in law. I can't quite remember how they had segregated it. But what happens, and then later 2000s, we had a lot of Kenyans, like maybe if you don't qualify for university, you'd say, you go to East Africa community. Now it will be the power of the pass. You can't qualify to study in Kenya, then you have to go to the East Africa community. It's creating a situation of are Kenyans like gonna stay in this country, especially young people who are very ambitious and optimistic about the future. They are not gonna mess it up. So it means that if you look at Germany, whose schooling is almost zero, be like, let me go struggle with the standards of living abroad rather than stay in Kenya, struggle with the same standards of living, because also there's a lot of inflation, there's a lot of taxation, and then again struggle with the basics. Then also, I think there's also a need for review of even the curriculum and the specific courses you're mentioning. I don't see a lot of introduction of code. I don't see a lot today. With the crisis of climate change and what's going on, the new jobs are actually in technology, in Amazon Web Services, in IT, in cloud. I don't see more of that. I wish the government emphasized that even in high school and not just do like computer.
But don't you think that actually leaving university education to the market forces could actually benefit in the end? Because probably even sometimes many learners just join university because yes, it's affordable, and you end up just doing any degree course. After all, you just want it on paper for your CV. That now you will sit down and consider, is this marketable? Is this necessary? Does it make sense for me to pay this much? And now with the proliferation of private universities across the country, because there are many, the conversion of all even polytechnics into universities, there's a lot of competition between universities themselves, that they will be forced by this new funding model to actually craft and design their degrees to actually be more competitive. It could actually be a plus eventually.
I'm very much excited because today we are talking about this from the youth perspective angle. And let me say this, Madam is talking about the East African community, but charity begins at home. We must first fix our country before we now move to other, to devolve ourselves to other countries in our region. Although it's something nice, it's something that we should encourage for, regional integration. But let me say this, everything in life is progressive. The population that we had in the 90s, in the 2000s, 2000s and up to 2010, is not the same population that we have today. Meaning the government is collecting more taxes today than it was collecting previously in those other years, in those other regimes. So I tend to think that, in fact, the government today, in the current budget, this is a budget that has allocated more money to the education sector than any other government in any other regime. So education, just stressing this, should be more accessible than it was yesterday. Let me say this, that I'm very much intentional about what my brother uttered, that most people are losing trust in the current government because of how it's implementing its policies. And let me say that Martin Luther King said that each betrayal starts with a trust. Meaning, if we trust you to ensure that the policies that are going to be implemented upon us are going to be, if we trust you that those policies are going, you are going to implement policies that are friendly to us, then you tend to, work otherwise, then we break that trust. And this is what the government is seriously working onwards. They want to break that trust from us.
But they're insisting that it is an issue of communication, probably. That the new funding model, yes, on the face of it, might look a bit expensive or disconnected, but probably it's only that it's an issue of understanding. And that is coming from this University of Embu Vice Chancellor, Daniel Mugendi. He says, according to him, he has dismissed claims that universities have increased their fees. He says they're still Yes, you may be required to pay the total cost of this degree cost maybe 600,000, but you will not pay all that directly. You have to get a scholarship, either a scholarship or bursary or a loan. Yes, loans are still there. But could we be misunderstanding the intention of the government?
I don't think that it's a good excuse for the proposers of the new university funding model to claim that the issue is communication. By the time you're coming up with such policies or such frameworks, it is expected that public participation has been part of that process. If public participation has been part of that process, it is expected that the language that will be translated into the final document is a language that reflects the voice of the public that participated in it. How you deliver that policy suggestion or that framework suggestion is supposed to be easily digested by the citizenry you're creating it for. And given the situation in Kenya, considering our literacy rate, it is paramount for any legislation that seeks to impact the lives of its citizenry to be done in a way that its citizenry can understand. Because these things are by design. The system is as it is by design. There should be goodwill to understand that, okay, 92% of my citizenry is illiterate to this degree. If I print this policy with all the legalese, they won't understand it. How do we downscale it to the common person? How do we downscale it to the parents? And more importantly, how do we downscale it to the students who need to understand it and be able to make informed decisions about how they're going to continue with their tertiary education? By the time you're coming out to mention that, oh no, it's a misunderstanding, 82% funding will come from the government and you'll only do the 18%. If the 82% funding is coming in forms of a loan by all definitions is something that I have to pay for at a later date. So there's no misunderstanding. It doesn't matter if I'm paying it in bulk at the beginning or if I'm paying it over a 10-year period. Let's say I'm in Kenyatta University, paying 612,000 a year for a 4-year course, which is 2.4 million. If I'm paying that over 10 years, and we all know that the starting salaries for recent graduates are meager, you can't afford to service that loan as easily, the burden is still the same. What we are talking about is the fact that the burden, the financial obligation on parents and students, it's too great. That is the main issue. The issue is not how much time it will take me to pay that loan or whether it's at the beginning. That's what they need to address. And saying that communication or understanding is an issue is a bit...
Yet sustainability of university education is also key, that we need to have quality, not just available slots, but sustainable and valuable as well, that at the end of the day, we have so many graduates out in the market, but employers are saying that this is not what we need. Hence, they're not employable. University education needs to be sustainable. Don't you think that that involves a higher cost to some point?
For me, sustainability can come at two angles. You mentioned the cost, but you can also mention a review of the curriculum. So which comes first? For me, if the curriculum was reviewed and then you come and say, hey, by the way, training code, training ABCD is very expensive. I'm not seeing the value addition that will, apart from maybe talking about inflation or IMF trickle-down effect. You know, I mean, IMF says this policy, you need to review the education. I also want to see in terms of value addition and the quality of service, and say, hey, we used to offer medicine like this. We are accounting for inflation, but also we are bringing experts in neurosurgery from maybe abroad, etc., and we are accounting for it. So for me, I don't see it. Also, when you bring the issue of loans, HELB, I wish HELB would come out and give us their data and statistics. And as we mentioned, even graduates today, when they graduate with the previous policy, they still struggle to pay loans 1 year, 2 years, 3 years later. Even when employed, they're like, I can't cut 5,000, maybe put it at 2,000. So if the current graduates are struggling, also you're saying that there are very many unemployed graduates, then the question is it a matter of cost or is it a matter of the review of the curriculum? The other issue I'd like to see, because I'm seeing even student leaders coming out, they used to even complain about food basics, kuinama. They used to say it all the time. So my question is, did they, I'd love to see.
What is kuinama?
You live
You
in the
sleep
moon.
so that
you, sleep
you forget you are hungry.
hungry.
Oh.
Like you're so hungry, yeah. Yeah.
It's a real thing.
It's a real, oh yes, it's a real thing. And that's why they used to be even subsidize foods. If you're in Kenyatta University, there's KM. If you're in UN, there's Klabu, you see? Because you're subsidizing food. Now you're bringing, the cost of living is already high. These graduates still are, they have dependents like parents or people they admire, etc. And then now, you're making the cost of education like unattainable. I don't think it's fair.
Wow. Yes. Every day you learn. Kuinama, I didn't know that.
You have never done so?
Lucky for me, I never got into that situation. I think things were much better back then.
I also wanted to add on the matters of like public participation. I'd like to see, I believe of course with the current law, they must have done public participation. I'd like to see the sample size of that public participation. Because if you interact with, for me I'm a mentor, so interact with university students, if you interact with even those in private universities still struggle. Remember, HELB originally used to even support private universities. They scrapped that. So now I'd like to see, okay, you did public participation, but of who? Because it looks like an elitist public participation for me, if it was done in the first place.
It is getting interesting. It is getting interesting. Just hold that thought. Okay. We need to take a break. But when we come back, we'll continue with this same conversation because there's a whole issue of disillusionment. Over 500,000 learners who are eligible for placement to public universities did not even apply for the same. Out of a total, not just public universities, just across all tertiary institutions, did not apply for those positions. And that speaks a lot because it was only about 800,000 who were eligible. And 500,000 is a huge number. You're watching Morning Cafe. We continue with the youth perspective this Friday with Brian Munaita, Anita Kirote, and Uno Ikenye. We'll be back after the break. shortly. But before that, I think this topic about education is still very interesting. And during the break, they were telling me some very interesting facts about what happens at universities. And, and I've learned that Kuinama is a real thing, and it is sad. But university education and generally tertiary education is no longer as attractive to a majority of Kenyans. And I think just the week before, last week actually on Monday, when Cooks was doing university placement and the data came out, what struck most was the fact that out of 800 and I think 26,000 Kenyan learners who were eligible for placement in the various universities and tertiary colleges, only about 280,000 applied for the same, meaning about 500,000 learners were not interested in this education. I think they're going to probably, let me not say where they're going, probably you know where they're going. Brian, where does, but before I come to Brian, I think Uno Kenya, it was your turn to speak. Where are these people going? 500,000 Kenyans, they should be going to college. Where are they going?
I think this one should raise an alarm to our, education sector stakeholders. Because let me say this, of course, 500,000 students are going to be, absorbed in the unemployment part of the illiteracy pyramid of our, of our country. Yet we claim that every day we want to solve the crisis of unemployment in Kenya, youth unemployment in Kenya, but we are not investing as much as we would want to see it happen. It's so very much unfortunate the way you're putting it, that 500,000 students are not going to join universities or tertiary institutions. Yet there is a student who had applied through COOPS, and I think she scored an A or an A minus.
A minus.
But she was called to a course that I think it's in the Kenya Medical Training College or what, a course that she did not even desire. She had not even thought about it. So let me say that as days progress, students and especially those ones who are in high schools and colleges, they are losing interest, in this tertiary education and college education. It's because we are not, beautifying it as it should be. You learn from, a university, then you end up being unemployed. The government absorbs people not on merit, but it's on a basis of who knows who. So why do I need to go to school? So we need to review how we are working out on these issues, so that, of course, in as much as we would want to solve this menace of unemployment amongst our youths, we also try and, solve this menace of that's facing our education, our education sector.
Okay, and probably because we've come from a campaign period and there was a lot of talk about the hustler, the younger people, but the main focus was on Boda Boda and Mamamboga. Could this probably informal businesses be where most people who would have pursued tertiary education are opting for? That probably there's a lure of quick money, that you can actually make 200, 300, 1,000 shillings in a day, and that is better than spending 4-6 years in at the university or at a polytechnic.
I think the issue with the current perception towards tertiary education comes down to three things. There's product market fit, there's the white collar shift, and there's also the effects of the economy. At the end of the day, when we're talking about university education, you're technically creating products who will go work in a corporate system. Unfortunately, the method or the process, those 4 years that create that product that is supposed to work in a corporate setting, is no longer producing products, so to speak, that the corporate setting is able to absorb. Because, as Anita and Kenya have mentioned, there's a mismatch between what they're being taught and what the corporate world needs. We have a lot of certificates now going out offering things you think would be basic, things like communication skills, things like writing skills, and these are things that people are putting on their CV, and it bumps them above the rest who even have degrees. And so you ask yourself, why is someone who has a degree unable to communicate and write properly? One, as I mentioned before, we are witnessing a shift. We're in the fourth industrial revolution. We are moving into AI, coding, robotics, virtual reality. That's where the world is heading towards. If you look at, I think McKinsey did a future of work report. A lot of the careers that we thought were prestigious, let's say things like accounting, engineering, even medicine to some degree, are having huge portions of them taken over by AI. You have predictive programs that can see, okay, based on the color of your skin and the bone structure and density, you're probably suffering from this. And we have fully automated software that can completely do your accounts for you in your business. And so the education system has failed to refine the process which they are using to build workforce for the corporate world, and that has led to the corporate world being unable to absorb the students. That's the product market shift bit. The education system hasn't evolved to ensure that we are being placed into corporate ready to go, which is why nowadays even for high-ranking employers, you sign a contract. They say we will train you, but after the training you have to stay with us for 2 years for us to recoup our money. That money is arguably equivalent to the amount you'd have spent in a private university. The second thing is the white-collar reset. As we've mentioned, economics takes center stage at the end of the day. With an increasing population, you find that you need more of blue-collar jobs. And the perception that people have been raised with, and we all understand that conditioning is very hard to break away from. You'll probably see a plumber and think, you're not doing too well in life, you know? But based on demand, plumbing, carpentry, metalworking, those are the things that are needed. But due to perception, a lot of people are growing up with not thinking, oh, I want to be the best welder in Kenya. They're probably thinking, you know, I want to be a CEO, I want to be a CFO, I want to be a high-flying executive. And that white-collar shift has taken people by surprise, because all of a sudden you're done with your 4-year degree and you're wondering, will I go back to a technical university to do plumbing for 3 years? You know, what will people say? Do I even enjoy it? How will I even get work? So that white-collar shift, that reset, has also affected people greatly. And another thing is, at the end of the day, the economy, the environment within which we are supposed to create jobs. The government, unfortunately, seems to be taking a stance that foreign investment is what grows an economy, but by simple economics, that's not true. It is the people who build an economy. The more money moves within an economy, the more opportunities are created. And we see them actively stifling the creation of that by exorbitant taxes, not being able to curb inflation. The shilling against the dollar, we're at 150, which is the highest it's ever been. And for, let's say, an export-import dependent country like Kenya with a great difference in those figures, it's really affecting the general feel and the possibility of people to create jobs. And unfortunately, just to add, you've mentioned the informal sector. It's not that they think it's going to make a quick shilling, it's that they don't have options. Because if you go deeper, in the boda industry, your boda rider probably has bought his bike on loan and he needs to pay back 600 a day. If he defaults, I think it's 3 days in a row, the bike is repossessed and they lose all that investment. So yes, it's keeping them busy, but at the end of the day, what are they taking home? 50 bob, 100 bob, before they pay that loan over a period of 2 years. The mama mbogas, the model they use, wake up early in the morning, go to Mshwari, borrow 5,000. Go buy your produce, come back, sell it, make 5,600, pay the loan, wake up the next morning, do the same thing. So it's really a lack of options. And it's not something that should be celebrated, that they're going to these informal sectors, when in those informal sectors they're still being exploited by market forces and even by the Kadogo economy.
Listening to Brian here, that issue of disillusionment is real. And if at all 500,000 learners were reluctant to actually apply for placement to tertiary institutions, and then this new funding model comes into force, it means the situation will be worse, don't you think?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I agree with you completely. And for me, I get worried because we can't use the same methodology that we've been using and expect different results. I mean, we have to go back to the drawing board and cut out our niche and know how to navigate. For me, I'm very concerned about how the education sector in this country is being handled. And you can see, even apart from this, you remember when CS Ezekiel Mashogu came on board, he had already started talking about it. He talked about it, it was dismissed, people thought it doesn't have any legs, it won't move. And now today, we are here, and it's sort of like we are choked. And to add to what he has said in terms of even companies, I know some big fours company have resorted to, they need you to just have a basic high school diploma. You're 18, you have a degree, you're 18, you have that high school certificate, and they just train you. Because they know at the end of the day, even if I get a graduate, I still have to train them for 1 or 2 years for them to get to the level I need. So you're like, what was the point? And companies, more and more companies are actually taking that policy whereby you come, you're new, we have to train you again, and it's very sad. Africa has missed out on the first industrial revolution, second, third, and now we are in the fourth, which is the easiest to jump on board. In terms of infrastructure, we don't have to bear the burden of infrastructure that developed countries have bared. So for me, I'd say we just we jump on board with the fourth industrial revolution. We go into ICT, we remodel our education system to fit that bid. I said the job opportunities in the 21st century, 22nd century are purely going to be based on IT. I mean, there's even an AI model that can read news. I know you've seen the whole robotics.
I'll be out of a job within no time.
No, you still have time.
God forbid.
So I get worried about the African policies. I think we need to go back. For China to rise, for 500 years, China was not doing anything else but thinking, doing what I'll do, and they came out and they're like, you know, if they have Samsung, we are bringing they have Apple, we are gonna have our own Huawei or Samsung. They did an intrinsic. They send their kids abroad, learn this. The future is in STEM. Let's do this. Let's have a priority focus as a country on where we are supposed to go. There is no hurry for us to develop. I look at Haiti, which is around 180 years, we are 60. We are the same level. Haiti did not have to cripple its citizens in order to develop. We are developing at what cost? I cannot live in Runda if I do not afford and struggle to even breathe. You see, I can live in Kilimani, so we don't have to jump on board with these IMF policies. It's okay, we are not in a hurry to develop. Thank you for your loans. Uganda has said we will develop with loans or without loans. And you know what, maybe from a Kenyan perspective, you look at maybe Museveni as a dictator, but if kwa ground vitu ni different, if you go to Uganda is a land flowing with milk and honey. They have food, they have Rolex, cheap food in the streets. Yes. But for us, yes, in terms of East Africa, we are when they're short people, the one who's slightly taller usually thinks they are tall, but they're still short. Okay. Yes.
And interesting you mentioned food because even as you talk about the fourth industrial, is it revolution?
Yes.
Yes. The fact remains that in Kenya, agriculture is still the main focus, even for the government. Issues to do with technology and industrialization are secondary. Yet even when it comes to agriculture, the government has not been able to convince the young person to go to university and actually develop within that line. Yet it's still the highest GDP developer. It is still the highest forex earner. It is still what people probably should depend on. When you talk about Uganda, the agriculture is actually way ahead of even technology.
Okay, thank you. This is what I'll say. I just came to realize that recently Kenya is the third leading producer of tea in the world. We are always exporting 300,000 metric tons of tea to other countries every single year. But now the problem comes in, how can I get motivated, yet every day in our media houses, news that come out of our media houses is that there are cartels who are running these industries. how then am I going to be convinced to invest in agriculture as a young person? So let me join it with what the president said recently. The president said that the government has really done a lot in this 1 year that it has been in office, but the problem is there is no proper and clear information dispensation to the common mwananchi. We do not know what the government has initiated last week. We do not have a clear information about what the government is intending to initiate that is going to impact the youths. So I think the government should invest more in how it dispenses information to the common mwananchi. If it is on issues to do with agriculture, we've had the government for the last 4 months talking about how it's intending to fight, or rather eradicate this menace of cartels who are running the agriculture sector in terms of milk industries, tea, coffee. But we do not know up to these 4 months, up to where we've reached, where has the government, how many steps has the government made towards these reforms. So I think information dispensation is where we are missing it. And the government, of course, should take part in investing more of it. Finally, let me say this. Whatever Madam Nkirote has just said is the pure truth. If you look at a country like Singapore, they just made a quick about that. I'm always told that in the 1970s, Kenya and Singapore were at par. But I don't know where who took part in our, sijui nani alitoroga. But let me say this. I have taken time to intentionally explore how Singapore, decided to make a revolution in terms of their economy, in terms of, their governance structure. And they developed 3 criteria, how will I put it? Something called an MPH. M stands for meritocracy, employ people on merit. If you employ people on merit, you are going to encourage those ones who are not merited to move, or rather to update their statuses to merit. Employ people on merit. Give someone a task based on what he understands, based on what he is competent about. Don't employ someone because he is your friend. Don't employ someone because you have a close relationship. Competency should overrule everything. Number 2, one very important thing is honesty. Let us always tell each other the truth. If this curriculum is not going to work, then we should all know that it's not going to work. Whatever Madam Nkrote has just said, that CS Machogu had raised an alarm about this, then what did we do about it? We need people to tell each other, we need to tell each other the truth about where we are making a mistake. My brother here, this one is not going to work. Even if you are my friend, even if this policy is going to, to increase your value, or rather the status in the society, or give you credit, it's not going to work. It will fail us.
Brian, there seems to be a disconnect, even as you comment on that. There seems to be a disconnect about our education system. What the government says is our mainstay being agriculture, and the need to be at par with other growing economies in terms of industrialization and technology. Probably that's where we need to sit and start from, because there needs to be a congruence between those 3. Why do we take people to university if it's not connected to our mainstay or to where we're going?
Exactly. Let me start by commenting on agriculture. It's actually something that resonates deeply with my heart, because SMARC's foundation stands for Smart Mechanized Agriculture, for Climate and Humane Sustainability. And we decided that, look, you can't solve problems at the same level they're created. Agriculture is our backbone. There is demand for food, both locally and internationally, but how do we encourage youth to take up the economic opportunity that agriculture represents? So we decided, fine, let's combine technology and the 4th Industrial Revolution, which is where we need to be, and let's combine the fact that agriculture is our backbone. Kenya currently has 12 million hectares of land that can be cultivated. Only 7 million hectares of that land is under cultivation currently. We also have 8 million hectares that can be irrigated. Only 0.9 hectares are irrigated currently. For our pilot project, what we did is we went to Samburu, which is an arid and semi-arid land, and 29 counties in Kenya are classified as ASOLs. We were able to set up on half an acre a model farm using drip irrigation systems, and we planted Chinese cabbage, kiboko cabbage and onion bulbs. In 4 months, we had 5,000 heads of kiboko cabbage, 4,000 heads of Chinese cabbage, and around 1,000 onion bulbs. All that produce at market value is around 800,000. And that's in 4 months, and that's in an area people would typically consider a desert. What I would like to see, based on our pilot project and what we are trying to do, which is expose youth to the economic opportunity in agriculture, and also considering the average age of a farmer is 55, as Mr. Kenya is mentioning, youth need to understand there's a shift in the dispensation. But two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. Let's use climate smart technologies like we did in Samburu, and let's leverage the fact that agriculture is our backbone, and let the government influence policy or create the infrastructure for us to invest heavily in the ASO counties. And I was very happy when the Deputy President mentioned that the solution to our food insecurity lies in the ASO countries. ASO counties, sorry. So let's do that. Let's invest heavily in irrigation, in agriculture, and let's do it in a climate smart way. Because Israel is a desert, but they have some of the best produce in the world. Brazil, 20 years back, before they started practicing syntropic agroforestry, was a desert, but now they're the biggest producers of, I think, is it coffee? And what we are seeing in the youth perspective is that we don't see why the government can't see the opportunities that Kenya has. Kenya has some of the highest mobile internet penetration rates. I think we stand at 85%. Almost everyone has a version of a smartphone. And people and other companies have leveraged that. We have foreigners coming here to do USSDs so that farmers can tell what the weather is, what time to plant and all that. Why can't Kenya decide, let's shift our education model, let's focus on programming, for example. We have some of the best internet in Africa. Let's become a hub. Let people from all African countries come to Kenya because Kenya has, let's say, a Harvard that specializes in programming so that we solve these problems from a Kenyan level. By 2050, they're estimating that Africa will have 44% of the world's youth population. The rest of the world is getting older. We are getting younger. We are going to be the workforce. So let's leverage that at this point because Western countries, one of their biggest economic products is their education. We have millions of people trying to get into Ivy League universities, trying to get into foreign universities. As youth, we are seeing that there is an opportunity. Let's set up a data center. We have Microsoft here. We have Google here. They see the potential. Why isn't the government able to see the potential that Kenya has to become a powerhouse, at least in one area? If you're going to specialize in programming, fine. If it's robotic, fine. But let's specialize and become a center that will show Africa the way forward in upskilling of its youth. Wow. Be it through agriculture or be it through technology. Can do both. Okay.
And listening to Brian, you get so many ideas coming out. But on this issue of agriculture being the mainstay, this education model, the funding education model, even you look at even the breakdown of degrees that we can use even as a sample. We rarely talk about agriculture in matters education.
Yes.
Don't you think that we're missing the point? If at all it's a mainstay, it's a backbone of the economy. How come it does not feature among the top degree choices or degrees being offered in our universities?
For me, I believe there is a big disconnect between the education offered na vitu kwa ground. And I mean, it needs to be crystal clear. In Germany, if you want to get into automation or you don't even need to go to school. Volkswagen, pronunciation, will give you opportunities. Mercedes will give you opportunities, which is the reason why even though Germany messed up in World War II, it was able to rise because on the mainstay, they had a very strong economy. Now, on matters agriculture, 2 months ago, I went to Chogoria to visit my grandmother, and macadamia was being harvested. The price that she told me she's selling the macadamia for, the labor that she had getting people to aggregate, collect, I told her, give me these things. I'll ask you, when TV47 pays your flight maybe to Mombasa, and you're there eating cashew nuts, macadamia nuts, and you go to the supermarket, are you seeing the disconnect in prices between what our farmers produce and what you get in the market? For me, the biggest issue in agriculture will be the wastage. Because it doesn't matter how much I plant, how many acres of land I have, how much good produce I I get, but at the end of the day, I have a disconnect with the market, and it's still the biggest headache today since we got independence. I don't know where I'm going to take the excess. Around 2 weeks ago, I'm always going to my village. I'm always going to the Rakanithi, and I stop. And somebody was begging me to buy a whole kg at 100. And I asked him, have you stolen a whole kg of tomatoes? And I was like, have you stolen this? I am just assuming you've stolen this because I can't. It's like, I have a big farm. I have so many tomatoes. I don't care what I sell. I just don't want to have wastage because I'll have to throw it. So my question is, no matter how much we produce, what's the value addition? And for me, I raise concerns, especially with counties, because agriculture is devolved. We can't have, like Makueni, I know they are doing the mango, they have the industry, the mango, they are producing juices, etc. Then, because Makueni, Kitui, the Rakanithi, they are almost in the same area. Then the Rakanithi says, oh, that's what Kivuda Kibwana did, even me I want, you do. Another one does. When I go to, I run Horticultural News, which is a magazine that writes on agriculture mostly for export and horticultural crops. When I go to farm visits and industries that have been funded by donors, etc., I find there's usually downtime. Fine, you're telling us there's a lot of wastage, then let's have quote-unquote industries. Let's have, when you have excess mangoes or ripe mangoes, I'll buy it, I'll convert it into edible crisps. You've seen the matoke crisps, etc., to avoid wastage. But there's a lot of downtime in these industries. And then when you copy-paste, why don't we have a situation whereby counties, or maybe if you put them into 8 provinces, you say, you, Uasin Gishu, you concentrate on milk and dairy, you have an industry. So your neighboring counties, maybe Elgeyo Marakwet, will not do the same, so that we know, ukitaka ABCD, go to this one county, instead of everybody trying to replicate and doing the same. So for me, the biggest burden in agriculture, in education system, is there's a gap that you wonder, is it deliberate? Is it that we don't want to work on it? Or
but without proper education, definitely our minds will not be focused on such things. We are all, as we said, everyone else wants to do IT because, yes, but IT to address what? IT towards what that is specific to us. Yes, even the programming you're talking about should be towards things that are common around us. Agriculture, for example. But without education, we are not going to head there, are we?
Yeah, we are not going to head there. First of all, let me take credit. I've realized that in one way or another, Madam Nkrote here is trying to also give credit to her mother county, Tharaka Nithi. I come from Nakuru County, and in my constituency, Molo, we grow potatoes. So everyone should know that.
Yeah. Cash crops are Molo.
Molo, we grow potatoes, and you can also find milk there. But my main concern on this issue is this, that not everyone is interested in IT. Not all students would want to take IT, but at least there is that common ground that, you know, these two, they are trying to argue it out that, you know, the government should try to invest on the basics of IT because the future is IT. So if I want to invest in agriculture, of course, in the near future, I know that, you know, IT will be required in the establishment of, you know, milk cooling plants. That's a whole lot of IT. We are talking about IT. We also have, like, for example, potatoes. There is a certain technology that I realize is being used in, you know, cooling these potatoes before they are ready for, you know, for sale, or before they are ready for export, if they are so exported. So IT, there are those basic principles about IT that we need to invest on in terms of incorporating it to our education, you know, reforms, which the government has not taken keen interest on that. So I think that is what we ought to do, and we ought to encourage the government to invest on.
Okay, and I want us to move this conversation now to the leadership. And to the politics, because all these discussions, you always have to go back to policy making, and that's the politics. 1 year after we went to the polls last year, it is time also to evaluate the performance of different members, the government, elected and nominated members to the National Assembly and the Senate. This week, Zalendo Watch came out with a scorecard which listed the performers of members, different members of parliament, and they were fair enough to actually also rate the performance based on age of members of parliament. Curiously, very interesting that some of the most active are younger members, and some of the least active are also very young as well. Something happened yesterday in the Senate. One of the active young members of the Senate, Gloria Orwoba, there's a motion by the Privileges and on the Committee on Privileges.
Privileges and Powers.
And Powers and Privileges, thank you for that. Powers and Privileges has proposed that she is suspended from the House for 6 months. She's staring at 6-month suspension because of her conduct there as a young leader. We will not go into the details of what she did, what she did not do. We are not the judges. We do not know the details, and we won't go there. Across in the National Assembly, another young member, not so young, but at least relatively young, the Embakasi East MP, Embakasi South MP, actually, Babu Owino, was also suspended for 4 days because of his conduct there. Still yesterday, we saw another very young member in a roundtable conversation at a media house just like this, act in a certain way that talked about said a lot to do with a lot about the conduct of younger members or younger leaders, for that matter. Do you think that there's a concern about, and Brian, it is your turn here, do you think that we should be concerned about the behavior of especially younger leaders, whether elected or appointed or nominated, that we are seeing more and more of them taking very hardline stances? Some of them could be termed extreme. I'm saying this because the notion has always been that we should, and even with the conversation we're having around this table, we should elect younger members to parliament. Probably they will articulate what we are discussing here better, so that to help in better policy formulation. But are we getting that? Is that what we're getting from the younger members? Be honest.
As a young member myself, I think here's what I'll say about young leaders. There's several issues that are playing into the conduct we're seeing manifest. As you mentioned, some of them are very active, and some of them have brilliant scorecards, but some of them are not, and they're tarnishing the name, so to speak. First of all, leadership is about perceptions. If you have, let's say, a deeper voice, if you're taller, it's assumed that you inherently will possess greater leadership qualities. And unfortunately, let's say in the Kenyan context, the younger you are, the less people assume you have something of value to put on the table. What some of the members are doing, of course, is reinforcing the perception that young people have no business being in leadership, which to a degree is false. As Bwana Kenya mentioned, one of the major things that democracy needs to function properly is doing it on the basis of a meritocracy. So for all intents and purposes, if Bwana Kenya has studied 4 years of law, gone to KSL, become an advocate, he has, let's say, a right, not even a right, sorry, he has the competency required to become a legislator, as opposed to, let's say, for example, someone who is 60 years old, never stepped foot in tertiary education, let's say got rich through, land or something of the sort, going to claim to do the legislation. There's a disconnect there. There's also the issue of representation. If Kenya is comprised of over 75% youth, it just stands to reason that a significant portion of the representation in parliament or government should be by youth. Because naturally, there are things you are thinking about, Fred, that are not in my purview, and I cannot even see. And there are things that I am seeing that are affecting me that you cannot see, because let's say you've already been through it, you know that life has ups and downs and it will get better. But at the same time, I expect that because you know there are ups and downs in life, you are able to iron out some of the things I don't necessarily need to go through. So what you're seeing, I think, in Parliament is there's no goodwill. First, from the older members of Parliament. a lot of these young leaders get into parliament, let's say, with a dream of what they'll do. They'll be able to legislate, they'll be able to influence policy, they'll be able to turn the country around. But when you get in, you realize you're the sole red spot in a sea of blue spots, and eventually you're going to be colored over by the blue. So as long as we don't have goodwill from older members to inculcate these younger members into how to do things properly, they will continue doing the things older members did to gain prominence or to feel like they have been given a voice. If this older member was rioting, they will lead riots. If this older member was insulting people on TV, they will insult people on TV. If this older member was, let's say, paid to vote for a motion or against a motion, they will do the same thing, because eventually the conditioning will just tip them over to the other side and it will feel futile. So there's an issue in terms of the succession within that legislature.
Okay.
How are we helping the younger members bring forth their issues in a better way? But at the same time, I will not discount the fact that you are an individual and you are aware of what you are doing and that you should be aware of the burden you carry in terms of representation. So it is disappointing from that regard. But there's a lot of things that are going into how they're behaving and their effectiveness, in my view.
Yes. And Kirote, seeing a young a female nominated leader to the Senate going through that, maybe her claims are legitimate, and we will not go into that because we are not privy to the details.
Yes.
But seeing that kind of process which ends up in the suspension for 6 months of a young woman leader, what does it make you feel?
It makes me feel extremely bad because I'm even wondering, I'd like to look at maybe the, what is it called? The rules of parliament. I mean, 6 months is insane. I mean, you could put it at 1 month, 2 months. Maybe she did, of course, we're not privy. Maybe she did something to warrant a suspension. But I feel like 6 months is too much. We've seen all matters of misconduct in parliament, even when you look at the Hansard. Personally, I've never had, because I checked the Hansard, I've never had over 6 months suspension. It's so sad. And the said lady is a radical and actually articulates issue with evidence. I just hope there's a matter of appeal.
She's actually among those listed as the most active youth senators.
Yes.
Yes, among the 5.
I just hope Parliament has channels of appeal for her to appeal and give her evidence and have that revoked. And what made me sad the most is the person who read out, because I was watching it in the morning, the person who was reading out, quote unquote, the verdict was also a fellow woman. So I wondered, was it like psychological, gimmicks? Get a woman to give a woman that sentence so that it looks legitimate. No matter what she did, I mean, 6 months is just, for me, it's extremely wrong. I don't support that. And as you're talking about matters of young legislators and their conduct, for me, I'd wish to remind them, you have a mandate to the people, and you have 3 roles: oversight, representation, and legislation. Anything else you're saying, we really don't know. Legislation, how many motions have you brought forward? How many bills? For example, today we are talking about the youth perspective in education, in agriculture, in technology. Which of young members of parliament have brought any motion to that effect? We need to see such track record. For me, I'd love to see Kenya Young. We have the Kenya Young Parliamentarians Association. Give us that data. Train their members on ensuring they have motions, bills, they have legislation that benefit the young people of this country. As a legislature, when the executive is saying, hey, we are going to revise the fees, etc., etc., tell them, no. I think this week, today is the International Youth Day.
It's actually tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow, yes. So this weekend, August, we've been celebrating the youth. I saw KYPA take young members, young leaders to interact with members in parliament. And I'm not even private to things they talked about. I wish they talked about education. I wish they talked about tourism. When you're moving the entrance fee to the national park for 400 to 2,000, it means for me to see a lion or an elephant, I mean, Mzungu will come and tell me about lions and elephants. I'm even more worried now about the young children. Maybe you've seen enough elephants, but what about your child? So those are the things I expect them.
I would also want to see more elephants.
Yes, those are the things I expect to speak more on issues affecting young people. Yeah, we have the climate summit coming up. I want to see young members say, how are the youth being engaged? Because we have a pre-summit. How are the young people being engaged in the core matters? And also when you're young, you don't speak also for yourself, you speak for children. So when you're there and you're representing people, you must remember those three things. And representation is also key. For me, I say there's no more youth than another youth, or there's no more man than another man. We respect you as people who've gotten there before us, but we expect you to conduct yourself in a certain way. We expect you to have round table discussions. And I mean, when somebody stands as a leader, you are not speaking as just you. It's not about your personal or behavior. You are a reflection of us.
Yet there's also the need and the temptation, rather, to trend. It is a real thing that when you trend, you feel that you're more influential, even as a leader.
Okay, let me say this, that when you assume leadership at a young age, it is a privilege. It is not by right, it is a privilege. And where we always get it as a miss is where we youths, you know, they always say that youths have the speed, they have the energy, but they don't know they are not sure of the direction where they're heading. So you will do anything, you know, being with all that energy, you'll just do anything to ensure that you remain relevant, you know, in these social media platforms, and just to give you credit. But at the same time, when you have power, step slowly. Step slowly. Whatever we are seeing happening in the youth governance space is not inspirational. It is not something that we need to encourage. And at least we need to ensure that, based on what I said, let's elect people on merit. Not because this person is a youth, I'm going to elect him. It's not because he has the energy, but it's because in his concept of leadership, there is a certain aspect of maturity. There is a certain aspect of growth. This person has, you know, there is how he is modified. And this is not what we are seeing. Looking at the case of Madam Orwoba, she's a person, or rather a legislator who has done quite a lot for Kenya. Including, you know, sanitary drives and defending issues to do with you know, the girl child. But at times she goes to the extreme end. There is a time she attended the Senate proceedings in stained clothes, and I tend to presume that, you know, we will not want to play this as a gender card, but there are extremes where we go, which are not like we should not absorb them. We should not accept them.
I say we accept because...
Let me finish. Let me finish.
I'll allow you to respond to that.
Yes, please, I need a rejoinder.
Let's not always play the gender card where there is irrelevance, where there is a mistake of fact, where there is a mistake of information. It's not a must for I to be, you know, to seek relevance in the social media pages, all in the name of, you know, creating crisis.
As a rejoinder, actually there are issues that require extreme measures. Desperate circumstances call for desperate measures. And no, today we will not be laughing, enjoying the privileges we are doing today, if we didn't fight for independence. We had to go, the Mau Mau had to go a fight for us to get independence. There was no negotiating. It comes to a time where there's no negotiating. And to look like I'm approaching the radical route, some things actually require radical measure. A repeal of Section 2A. You wanted us to do what? To chill, to talk nicely. These issues have been affecting women for a very long time. We've been quiet about it. Tax. Kewapa had to do a lot to reduce the tax on sanitary towels, tax on food. Remember, some women are not on baby food. Remember, some women are not feeding their children on naan, etc. because they want to. It's because they actually don't have milk. So there are things, it's not a matter of privilege. There are things that are so basic, just like the education we are talking about, that we cannot let it go scot-free. I mean, we have to do something about some of this matter.
This energy that we are talking about.
Do you agree, Brian, that some of these extreme measures taken by younger leaders are perhaps necessary, according to what Nkirote says?
I think some of the measures taken are necessary. And that's why I mentioned before, representation is important. If women form 51% of our population, logically, there should be a similar representation in parliament as well. And this is not because of gender, this is just in terms of merit and representation. It's very hard, let's say, if let's say we were, a parliament sitting, there's 3 men here, 75%. It's very hard for us to understand or relate to her issues. So if there is representation, some of these issues do get solved. And sometimes, yes, desperate times call for desperate measures, as she mentioned, because if she hadn't done that, I wouldn't be aware that it's such a crisis. There wouldn't be so much talk about it, and arguably, probably the tax wouldn't have been reduced. So in some cases, yes, desperate measures are allowed.
And sorry to also bring it, when you look at how Gloria is approaching her issues, number one, she came about, I think she's quote unquote attacking the patriarchy. She came one with the issue of the perception, or when you see the case he mentioned, number one, he talked about that. Two, now she's going against, what is it called? Like the whole, I'm trying to really find the right words, but she's attacking certain facets of the patriarchy using different methodology. Remember, right after the incident he mentioned, she had billboards up talking about distributing sanitary towels. She's going around the country doing that, addressing period shame, etc. And then now she's gone like now a step further and saying that, hey, technically we have more, I don't want to go into the intricacies, but because we have more men in parliament than women, this is what we are subjected to. Guess what? Njoki Ndong'o said it. Maybe I don't know the methodology Gloria is using, but Kewapa always has these statistics. Njoki Ndong'o said it, Cecily Mbarile said it, Charity Ngilu said it when they were in parliament. So he's just saying, treat me as a human being and let's respect each other. Thank you.
Just a minute. Yes. I'm not certain that Madam Nkirote is sure of the reason as to why Senator Roba has been suspended for 6 months. And let me say this, that she has been suspended because of accusing other legislatures of, sexual perpetration.
There was more than that.
Yeah, that's why we chose not to.
And there is more than that. But he who alleges must prove. And of course, we are of the view that she should not be condemned unheard. She should be heard. And before she was suspended, let's presume that maybe she was heard or she was not heard. But you see, the way we approach issues to do with policy formulation, policy implementation should not go to the, should not be to the extreme end of losing ourselves, losing, the thought that we are in possession of the dignity of those people whom we are serving, Let me say this, that there is a theory called the social contract theory, that we as citizens have rendered part of our powers to legislatures, to our leaders. And therefore, we ought to see them, or rather they ought to conduct themselves in a certain mode of decorum and respect, because they are not themselves. They are being controlled by a certain power that we have donated to them. But of course, Senator Roba is really doing a lot, and I gave credit to her, in fact, as we began this discussion about youth leadership. But at the same time, where there is a wrong, let's call it out. Not because she's a lady, but it's because she's a leader.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as we come to the end of our discussion today, a very engaging discussion, I'll give you each about 30 seconds to give your final word. It could be anything that you want. Tomorrow is International Youth Day. You could speak to them about climate change, about agriculture. Let's start with you, Brian.
My final words. On the eve of International Youth Day, I would like to urge my fellow youth to be very concerned and very intentional about their engagement with politics and governance, because the one thing that equalizes everyone is the policies that your government puts in place to affect your life. It's the one institution, it's the one instrument that can impact all of us. And if we are not aware, if we are not cognizant of what they're doing, our lives might be legislated away. So kindly, any youth hearing this message, take an interest in matters of national politics, in matters of governance. Let's go for these seats. Let's change the perception and let's solve problems, because we are equipped with tools that the prior generations were not.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Kirote.
All right, thank you so much. For me, I must remind you of the quote that each generation has been called for a purpose and a cause. And I think we need to sit down and look and really fight for a cause and a direction forward to better this country. We've had the political revolution in 1992 for the repeal of Section 2A. We fought for colonialism and had that political revolution. We've had a political revolution, we've had a social revolution. It's now time to have an economic revolution, and we must think and sit down and look at where that looks like. If we are not on the table, then we are definitely the menu. Thank you.
Uno, you get to wrap it up for us.
Okay, let me say that it is easy for any idle youth outside there to be, just to take part in idle debates about how the world is getting worse, how the world is becoming unconducive for our existence. But it takes a higher grace for every youth to accept and to embrace the fact that we have challenges, we have problems, but we are the solutions. We bear the solutions. As I conclude, let me say thank you to TV47. Let me give you a lot of credit. You offer us, a very conducive platform for us to air out our ideas. Yep. And let me also greet the great people of Molo constituency. That's my home constituency. And let me say hi to my father back at home and my mother. Thank you so much.
That's great. Uno Ikenya, president of the Nakuru County Students Caucus, a law and governance expert, Anita Nkirote, governance consultant, and Brian Munaita, chief operations officer, SMARCS Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, asanteni sana. It has really been an engaging discussion, and it's always a pleasure to have the youth perspective right here on the Morning Cafe on TV47. And now I think I go straight to the editorial comment. Yes. Oh, yeah, my director informs me we'll get some feedback first before we do that. And remember, in our question this morning, we are asking, should age be a factor in selecting our leaders? Over to you, Flora.
Well, quite an interesting conversation there, and it's always great to see young leaders air out their views concerning matters national interest. But right now, let's have a quick look at the feedback. Of course, our question of the day being, do you think age is a factor when it comes to selecting our leaders? At TV47 News on X, at TV47 Kenya on Facebook. The hashtag is Morning Cafe, and I'm just sampling some of the feedback from Facebook here. Geoffrey Ondigi says, yeah, immature leaders are dangerously dangerous. I see Africana here says, yes, selecting leaders, old leaders makes the economy sleepy with the current economic situation in Nigeria. And I see Leonard Lennox here says, very young, very corrupt. They want to amass wealth in their early years. Electing aged leaders who have achieved much justly should be encouraged. From Facebook, another Chris Markia says, no, as long as the leader understands his or her role as a leader. That's some feedback from Facebook. And from X here, I see Sheldon Shapaya says, even education should be a factor that should not be left alone when electing these leaders. And just a final comment, Samuel Ima says, their character and policies should be the main factors. Of course, keep interacting and dropping in on the conversation. Do you think age should be a factor when selecting our leaders? At TV47 News, on X, at TV47 Kenya on Facebook. The hashtag is Morning Cafe. Fred?
And now to our editorial comment this morning. The recent suspension of a young member of Kenya's Senate due to alleged gross misconduct raises concern about the conduct and behavior of young parliamentarians. It is intriguing that this same senator was listed as one of the most active members in the House just a day before the suspension or the proposal to suspend her, highlighting the complexity of the situation and the potential for hidden issues behind the scenes. While the specific accusations against a senator may not be detailed in this commentary, the suspension brings to light broader questions about the support and guidance provided to new and young parliamentarians. Over the past year, a pattern has emerged where some youthful members of parliament have displayed behavior that is questionable and often falls short of the standards expected. Among the concerns is the prevalence of extreme political views and a propensity for hardline stances among young parliamentarians. Additionally, the adoption of belligerent behavior and unruly actions in public forums, including on live television discussions, reflects a misguided belief that such conduct will enhance their popularity. In an era dominated by the influence of social media, it appears that some young leaders are grappling with a dilemma between seeking genuine accomplishments through meaningful work and seeking fleeting attention through sensationalism. The critical question that arises from this situation is, where will the necessary guidance and direction for these young parliamentarians come from? Could seasoned and experienced parliamentarians play a vital role in mentoring young colleagues? Are political parties aware that they too bear responsibility in instilling a sense of ethical conduct and responsibility in their members? What will awaken the voter, or constituents for that matter, to their responsibility to hold their representatives accountable by demanding transparency and accountability? It is our hope that the collective